Good evening, everyone. My name is Sam Nasser, and this is the Cleveland C# VB.NET user group. A little bit about the group. We meet every month. The meetings are free of charge and open to the public, and we cover a variety of topics related to .NET. You can find all the meeting information for both past as well as future meetings posted on meetup.com at the link listed at the bottom of the slide. We always like to give a big thank you to our sponsors, PostSharp and DevExpress, for sponsoring the post-meeting prizes, which will be given off using the evaluation forms. I would also like to thank the .NET Foundation for sponsoring the online website at meetup.com. And last but not least, we'd like to thank NIS Technologies for sponsoring the virtual meeting space. I'd like to also give a big thank you to Manning.com for providing a 35% off discount at Manning.com using the MTP CLEC21 discount code. The link and the discount code will be made available in chat in just a little bit. Some general information. First and foremost, please keep in mind participation is encouraged. And like I always say, the only stupid question is the one not being asked. However, when not speaking, kindly ask you to mute your microphones to prevent any background noise. And we always like to keep it casual but organized, so jump in with any questions or comments at any point in time. But at the same time, we want to give our speaker enough time to go through all the slides and the demos. Lastly, the meeting is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube in just a few short days. So, without further ado, tonight's feature presentation is One Config to Rule Them All, an introduction to Azure App Configuration, and that will be done by Sam Gomez. Sam joins us from the Columbus area. He has 13 plus years of development experience, mostly in the Microsoft stack. He's active in the user group community as well as on the speaker circuit, and we're very happy to have him and host him for the first time here. So with that, welcome, Sam.
Thank you so much, Sam, for having me, and welcome everyone. Thank you for coming today to this presentation titled One Config to Rule Them All, an Intro to Azure App Configuration. A little bit about me. A fun fact, I'm originally from Mexico. I am currently a tech lead at a consulting company called Jenica. We are fully remote, and we are actually hiring right now. So if you are looking for a job or know someone that might be looking for a job, you can look at our website at jenica.com. Check us out, and if you feel like applying to any of those jobs, let me know, and I can refer you. When I'm not developing, I love spending time with my family. I love watching movies, playing video games, and probably the only other topic that I'm as passionate about as technology is soccer. So you can get me talking about for hours. I love to watch, I love to play, and I coach my 5-year-old soccer team. So very, very, very passionate about that. You can follow me on Twitter at thesoccerdev. You can also go to my GitHub to get the code that I have or that I will show you today for the demo. As well as other applications that I've created for other demos, other presentations, in other events. I'll be more than happy to connect through LinkedIn as well. If you have any questions after the meeting about this or Azure Cognitive Services is another area or another product that I also do presentations on. So I'll be more than happy to connect. So the agenda for this presentation, we're going to look at what is Azure App Configuration, just a definition. We're going to look at some scenarios that I've actually run into where I believe that Azure App Configuration could have made a difference. We're going to look at the benefits, some of the features that it has compared to using files for your configuration. And then finally, we're going to look at all that in a demo. So what is Azure App Configuration? This is straight up from the Microsoft documentation. It's a cloud service that allows you to centralize configuration and feature management. And I do want to make an emphasis on centralized because that's going to play in some of the scenarios that we're going to review in a moment. Now, we all know that dev environments are unstable by nature most of the time. That's where our code is first deployed. That's where sometimes we go make changes or go play with it, make experiments, trying to troubleshoot issues. So it's more than likely, or I've seen it happen very often, where dev environments are broken all over the place because of different reasons. And one of the reasons is configurations. Either they're not there, they don't match other environments, or there's different issues that you might have there. So if we can remove that constraint, or we can remove that problem from our environments, I think we should do everything that we can, because who doesn't like stable environments where you can develop or test. So there's three scenarios that I just want to go into real quick. Like I said, scenarios where I think having a product like Azure App Configuration could make a big difference. So first one is local settings checked in, settings shared across different applications, and finally having a repo that is not updated. So local settings checked in. I think this is a tale as old as time. I've done it before. I've seen it done it where a developer is working on something locally, makes a change to either troubleshoot an issue or makes a change because he's working on a feature, whatever the case may be. He forgets to undo that change. It gets checked in into the repo, and if you're lucky, the issue stops at the dev environment. But depending on how you have your environments configured, the problem could go all the way to QA, UAT, how many environments you may have. So like I said, I've seen it happen. And this is because if you use files for your configuration and your code are tightly coupled. So every time that you do build, you run the risk of a configuration file or a configuration change going with that build. So that's why it's very important, or having your configuration separate gives you a little bit of an advantage. The other scenario that I've run is settings that are shared across different applications. So I ran into this not that long ago, where one day I came to work. This was really early in the morning. I started my application locally that I was working on. I go a couple steps and then it breaks. The error that was coming up, it was something wrong with the database. Looked like a username, or the user that we were using, it wasn't no longer had access to the database. So I had to reach out to a couple other teams to try to figure out what the problem was. Finally, it turns out that somebody either changed the password or it expired. So we had to get a new password for the user. We had to change it locally, the usual, test it, make sure that it works. I change it, I fire up the application, I get a little bit further, and then it breaks again. Why? Because that same user was used in a service that the application was calling. This repeated itself a couple or 2-3 more times across different teams. So a lot of resources, time and money that were spent because the settings are all over the place. And if you change it in one place, that doesn't mean that automatically, obviously, it's going to translate or it's going to spread to all the other places where that same configuration is being used. So that's why I made an emphasis on centralized when we were looking at the definition, because having everything in one place, it gives you that advantage of changing it once and not having to worry about the rest of the applications that might be using that value. And then finally, the repo not updated. Kind of related to the previous one, where we have, or I've seen settings that are not maintained because they're part of exist in a part of the application that nobody really uses. Nobody really cares if it's not working because it's not tested normally, or if it's in the dev environment and it's not working, it's fine. But we also ran into this where we had to actually test that part of the application that hadn't been updated in a long time, and we had to change a configuration in a couple different places to be able to test and to be able to verify that whatever changes we were making, we're actually working properly. So another scenario where if you just change it in one place, or you had your configurations in one place, it would give you an advantage and it would save you a lot of time and lots of headaches. So why do you want to use Azure App Configuration? What are the advantages that it gives you? So number one, again, centralized management setting. You know where all your configurations are. You know that you only have to change it in one place. You know where you have to go. Dynamic configuration. As we're going to see in the demo, it allows you to change your configuration dynamically. Feature management, you also have access to previous versions, and it complements Key Vault. So for centralized management setting, as you can see on the in the screen, you could have all your settings for different environments in one instance of Azure App Configuration, and just pull them based on the label that you have configured for it. Or you can have multiple instances of app configuration, one for dev, one for QA, so on and so forth. But again, even if you have different instances per environment, all the configurations for a particular environment would still be in one place. So dynamic configuration, like I said, this allows you to change your configurations without having to rebuild your code and build and release your code. It takes change automatically without you having to do anything else other than maybe write a little bit of code. There's two different ways in which you can accomplish this. One is a polling method. So you can have your application just query or call Azure App Configuration every certain amount of time to pull the latest configuration values. Or you can do it with a push method using events. So for example, Azure Service Bus. Obviously, this last method is going to be preferred because it's going to be real time. The polling method, depending on how long is your window, you're going to have to wait until an hour or 30 minutes have passed before you have the latest changes in your application. Apart from configuration, also Azure App Configuration allows you to do feature flag management. So if that's something that you are doing right now and you start using Azure App Configuration, you could move that over here. It offers dynamic feature management. So just like with the configuration, the features can also be managed dynamically. You also have the option of feature filters. So you can do targeting filters where you can only do it for a particular amount of users. You can do it by time window, or if you want something a little bit more specific for your use case, you can set up a custom feature filter. Out of all these, the time window is probably the easiest to implement and the one that requires less code. Custom is the one that is going to require, obviously, the most amount of code so that you can configure whatever it is that you want to, whatever criteria you want to do for your feature flag, or your filters, I should say. You have access to previous versions, so you have the ability to compare with previous versions of the same instance and of other instances. So if all of a sudden you find out that your environment is not working properly, it was working fine yesterday, but it's not working anymore today, you have the ability to go into the Azure portal, compare those two, the different periods of time, and figure out what changed between the two. And like I said, you can also do that between different instances. So if you have different instances for each environment, you can compare those two in case that you need those two in sync and you're having issues in one environment and not the other. You can also see the changes for an individual key. So you have access to the full history of a key. You can see the values that the previous values, what changed in the time. Again, just in case that you need to do some troubleshooting or you need to figure out where something went wrong if you're having trouble with one of your environments. And then it complements Key Vault. If you're already using secrets for your in your applications, you already have your more sensitive information in Key Vault. You can set up Azure App Configuration to just go directly into your access key, grab those values, and they will be available to your application just like any other configuration value. And we have an example of that on the screenshot. We're going to see that in the actual Azure portal in a minute. So this is going to be a sort of a demo heavy talk. That's all I have as far as theory. I'm going to go through a sample application and show you, all the different features that we talked about Azure App Configuration, so you can see them in action. So what are we going to cover? Accessing app configuration, just very simple, going and getting values and using an application without having to worry about any of the other features. We're going to move to do the dynamic configuration. So we're going to see both the polling method and the push method, so you can see how you can configure those. Then we're going to look at feature flags. We're going to see that on an application as well. And finally, we're going to look at the portal and how you can do previous versions of your values of your configuration. Now, we all know that demos are not always, they don't always go smoothly. And I think I've done this in the past. A little prayer for the demo gods, a little offering. Hopefully everything goes well. Let this code compile in not an hour, but a little while. Allow this application to run with speed and zest, as this will keep users glued to my test. If my code blows up in my face, do it with style and grace. And last but not least, when all is said and run, let thy requirements have been correctly done. So hopefully that works. It's worked a couple times. I've had a couple issues in the past where the demo gods don't really like the offering, but hopefully today is one of the good days. So let me pull up. And actually, before I move on to the demo, any questions about what we saw on the slides before I actually go into the demo itself? All right, I'll take that as a no. So here's my Azure portal. This is the resource group where I have all the stuff for my current demo. If you want to create a new instance of Azure App Configuration, in case you are new to the Azure portal by any chance, you go to the Azure portal and you type app configuration. And the very first one that pops up, obviously, is Microsoft one, so this is the one you want. And then if the as with any other Azure resource, is usually the main thing that you got to configure: subscription, the resource group, the location, obviously the resource name. As with others Azure offerings, you have the ability to create a free instance of Azure App Configuration if you just want to play around with it, see if it will actually work for your situation. For most intents and purposes, if you're just trying to test it, obviously the free version of the free tier is going to be more than enough. And if you need it, you can go to the standard. But like I said, for the most part, you're gonna be okay with just the free version. I saw a question pop up that how accessible is this service to solutions that are outside of Azure? I actually haven't had that use case come across, but I would assume that there's a way that you could configure some sort of access to the app configuration from outside Azure. I would really be surprised if there's no way for you to access it from outside Azure. Let me look up into that, and I can, if we connect through LinkedIn or Twitter, I can reach out to you and give you that answer. I don't know that off the top of my head. Any other questions before I continue? All right. So as you can see, I have an app configuration here, and I have also a key vault. This demo is very simple because I want to keep the focus on the features themselves. So I have the keys. Looks like I don't have one. Might have deleted it. So I have a key vault, and then I have my Azure app configuration. If I come over here, curious what this is pointing to then. All right, looks like I might have deleted that, so let me add that real quick. That's not what I wanted. Secrets is what I want. Never mind. Keyword value test. There you go. I was looking at the wrong section. Anyway, so those are the two resources that I have. Over here, I have a small application, which is basically the same one that I have on the demo. That is just display some values that I have in the configuration. So I have here an environment value, and then I have a keyword value test. And if we go over here to the configuration, go back to there we go. So we got to the configuration explorer. This is the value that we are looking at for the environment value. So we have two different labels here for development and production. If we look here, we click on edit, you can see the value for development. And if we look at production, you will see the value there as well. So those are the two values that we have over there. And I am going to now move over to the code so you can see how that is all working. Okay, so it's really easy to get everything set up and get Azure App Configuration ready to go. So all you have to do is in the configure, you add this configure app configuration, and in here add Azure App Configuration, and then you have the options. So I am using that environment flag to determine which values I'm going to pull. Right now I have it set up to production. So when I start this local version of the application, what we should see in the application is it should be the value of purple for the environment value itself. Another thing that I want to call out real quick, because it's going to come into play when we look at the features, is that over here there should be another, or there will be another option on the menu on the left that you will see once we enable the features for this application. Now this is just a very simple, this is the actually the Blazor sample application. Like I said, nothing super complicated, nothing really going on here other than being really a demo of what you can do with Azure App Configuration. I'll show another application that has a little bit more going on in a little bit. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to get back to my code. Oh, where'd it go? There it goes. Okay, so that was just the very basic thing to do when using the configuration, and just like you would do with any other configuration source, like your files, you just access a configuration and then the key that you want to access. That's all really what you need to do in order to be able to access that. So pretty seamless if you're already using, if you have a .NET Core application and you're already using files, it shouldn't be that big of a leap to replace your configuration with this. So now I'm going to use the, I want to switch over environments. And the other thing that I want to do is I want to enable keyboard access. Otherwise, the application obviously is going to fail. So hopefully, since we did our prayer before this, the live coding is not going to come back and haunt me. you at? Come on. There we go. All right. So as you can see, before the production side didn't have the production label doesn't have the key value. So I can now I am pulling that. Before it wasn't showing because we weren't pulling from that label. So everything again is configured the proper way. You don't have to worry about that. And now we're going to move over to, we're going to move to dynamic configuration. So we're going to go back to our code, and we're going to do the polling method first. So as you can see, again, it's just a couple lines of code, and I am specifying that every minute I'm going to be polling Azure App Configuration for the latest values so that I can show them on my application. This is done using what is called a Sentinel key. So the way that you do this is your application is going to be monitoring that Sentinel key for any changes. If there's any changes to it, it's going to refresh the entire configuration and show that value appropriately. So let's restart this. Make sure I don't have anything else that I might be missing. Okay. All right, there we go. Now, while that happens, we're going to come over here to app configuration again. As you can see here, there's our Sentinel key that we are using to determine when to do our refresh. We are going to change this first. So development, we're going to update that value to red. We're going to update our Sentinel key. We're going to apply that change. Then it will take a little bit, but eventually the configuration, it's going to show up in here. So there you go, red. Now we're going to come over here. And this is, as you can see, an application that is already in Azure. And if I refresh the application immediately, it takes the values, or it changes the values automatically without me having to rebuild the application, redeploy the application, which, if you remember in one of the scenarios that we talked about, one of the scenarios that I mentioned during the presentation, it could have saved a lot of time and money in that particular situation. So this is one of the, personally, what I find one of the coolest and most useful features of Azure App Configuration. If you need to make a quick change, if you need to fix something real quick, and you're pressed for time, you don't have to wait for any of those processes to complete in order for your configuration to change and your application to return to a more stable state. So the Azure version is using the push method, but still the principle still applies, that it's something that it's something that you don't have to wait for the restart. Like Jeff said, yes, there's no app service restart. You just have to refresh your browser, or you navigate between pages. Your application will be again up and running, and like I said, in a stable state if something broke or whatever the case may be. So let's go back to the code again. We are going to disable this. We don't want to do that. Again, the polling method, it only requires those lines of code that you saw in there in order for it to work. If you want to do the push method, which again is obviously, wrong key. It's obviously more real time than having to wait for an hour or 30 minutes, however long it is that you're polling. Also, it goes against the usage of your Azure App Configuration, so you probably don't want to do that. But super easy again to set up the push method. The first thing that you need to do is configure here. Again, we are going to use a Sentinel key, and then we're obviously going to refresh all the keys again. We don't have any expiration because we're not trying to do that polling method. The only thing that you do have to do is obviously you're going to have to write some code to process the service. In this case, the service bus message that you're going to get every time that a configuration value is changed. Now, from the Azure App Configuration, there's also something that you can do, or that you need to do, I should say. So if you go over here to the events, so as you can see here, I already have an event subscription that is what's being used to do these, do the push in this case. But if you were to create one from scratch, and here again, you can do, you've set up the same way that you set up other resources in Azure, name. You can choose the schema that you want for your messages, topic, source resource, system topic name. You have the option to choose between two different types of events right now. So modified and deleted. You could, if you wanted, you could set up different event subscriptions for different types. So if you want to do something, if you want to take different action, or you want to do something else when a value is deleted, you can set up a completely separate from each other, or you can just do it in the same one. And then you have different options for the endpoint type. So right now I'm using the service bus option, but you could do an Azure function, you could do a webhook, storage queues. You have different options on how you want to set it up. Again, if you wanted to take some action, like email someone, if a value is changed, just to make sure that you're keeping an eye on your changes, that's something that you could configure if you wanted as well. So those are the two things that you need to do. One, set up your event or configure your event in Azure App Configuration, and set up your application to process those events. Again, a little bit more code than the polling method, but not so much that it's not actually worth the effort. So we're going to restart our application again. And we are going to go over here while it starts. We're going to go back in here. And really, for the local, it's not going to be, the demo is really not going to be different than what you saw already. You see the value change. It's just the method behind the scenes that it's going to be completely different from the polling. So apply. Now remember, you always have to do, because the Sentinel key is what the application is actually watching, you also have to change this, and that's 38. So apply. Then refresh. There you go. So again, the value changed without having to rebuild the application, the release branch, or do a release, or whatever your process is with your CI/CD. And on the Azure, or the application that is deployed in Azure, you see the value change as well without having to do anything else. So I see a question. So Jeff, been confused on how this scopes to different applications. Most are specific to an app service environment. Others might be shared, but how to limit scope of what can be seen. Are you talking about are you referring to how to limit what, to see development and production, between the development and production labels? Is that what you're talking about?
Basically, Sam, hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Um, like if I have web app 1, web app 2,
Mhm.
maybe they have the same configuration settings, right? But different values. So, where's the parent of this? This is your Blazor application. You know what I'm saying? I just can't have a list of key value pairs. Otherwise, I'd have to have web app 1 dot font color, web app 2 dot font color, or something like that is the key. How do I scope these?
So you can set up, you could probably set a different, if the values are different between the applications, you could use the labels for that. Um, and you could do,
Then where do you put environment? I mean, there's, can I have more than one label? Is there? It seems very, very basic.
so you can have definitely more than one label. And I know that, and I can look that up a little bit more, but I know that have, uh, you can have different formats for your label. So you can specify first the application and then the environment, for example. And I believe that you can change this filter to be a little bit more complicated so that you can process those kind of different formats for your applications. And I can put something together that how to do that as well. But you should be able to do that a little bit complicated.
Okay.
I have another question. Is the app linked to a specific app config? Yes. So something I didn't show. So right now I have it as an environment variable where it's a connection string of the app configuration. So you can link that here, and this is what's linking to that instance of Azure App Configuration that I've shown on the demo. So if you have different instances per environment, you could override that environment variable, or you can set up the value for that environment variable in your release pipelines, and you can point to different instances if that's what you have. Did that answer your question, Polly? Yeah. So that's one option that you could have different instances for different apps, but then that could grow really quickly depending on how many apps you have. If you want to set it that up, you can also set it per environment. Um, that you can have the dev environment. I've seen it configured like that, where client has a dev environment or an instance for the dev environment for Azure App Configuration, a QA instance, and so on and so forth. So that's another way that you can configure. But not how to share configs multiple apps. So the connection string, you can set that up with different in your different applications. That will allow you to share the same instance or have access to the same instance from different applications. Does that answer your question, Polly?
I guess I'm going to unmute. I guess I'm sort of following up on what Jeff said before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I'm sitting here thinking, okay, you're very likely to have font color as something that you want to have a setting in a bunch of different apps, but you don't want it to be the same. But then you might have others where you want it to be the same, and then trying to share between them but not share between them gets really complicated with, like you said, you end up having to say app one font color and app two font color and something like that. I'm really confused as to how you could save time by using only one app config for all of them, but then you're in a big mess with things like that. But then if you try to resolve that by having separate app configs for each app, then you're not saving a lot of time, you know?
Yeah. So
Like,
and Yeah, and I don't show this on the demo, but there's a way that you can set up so these are your label filters. So in the first line is saying, get me any key that doesn't have any sort of label. And then the second one is saying, okay, get me all the keys that have a value on the label that matches what the environment name is. So you can have different labels and you can configure those, you can add those differently. And that's what would allow you to do, I think, what you and Jeff are trying to accomplish, of having different apps accessing different applications. Because you would configure that per different applications. You know, the way that you would configure this would be different if you want to go to different use different labels for that. Does that make sense? And when I'll upload a change for the demo into GitHub to show how to do that as well. Uh, Before I move on, any other questions or anything else on that topic? Okay, so we are going to continue. We saw the refresh automatically. Now we're going to look at the decoupling, or the decoupling part of the configuration. So you look at the app settings.json. I don't have any of those values obviously configured here because everything is coming from from the um, from the app configuration. So what I do have, for example, if anyone has used ARM templates, I have an ARM template that that will allow me to make changes to that app configuration. So this is normally how you would do it. Obviously, you wouldn't go into the app portal, the Azure app portal, and change your values there. You want something obviously a little bit more automatic, a little bit more automated. So I have in Azure DevOps a release pipeline. If anyone is, I don't know if anyone is familiar with DevOps, or if you use DevOps or have used DevOps. So I have just a very simple release pipeline that takes that. It's going to take the ARM template, and it's just going to do a deployment to Azure, which is what you would want to do to have this automated and have your code and your configuration completely separated. So I have this is going to another GitHub repo. They're completely separate. They're completely separate repos. My code and my configuration, and I have a continuous deployment trigger so that whenever I make changes and I check in changes to this, it's going to be pushed into the Azure app configuration. So I'm going to change this, my Sentinel key again, 7, gonna save, gonna come over here. Go ahead and commit these changes. There we go. And then we're going to see over here, I go to releases, and we have the release, or we have the new run started. We're going to come back to my Azure application over here. As you can see, it still has the previous value, obviously, because this release has not been completed. So while that is going on, we're going to look at the compare function. So as I mentioned before, you have the option to compare between different instances. So here it's telling you, the store or the instance that you are currently at, and then you can compare with another one. If I had, let me see if I have another one over here. There you go. So just just for fun, I'm going to compare it to that. And I'm going to do today at noon. I'm not going to do a label. I'm going to do the same time. I'm going to hit compare. And it shows you everything. It shows you all the differences in between the two. So as you can see here, there's a bunch of keys that are on this one that are not on the other one. And same with this. It's telling you that it exists here but doesn't exist over here. But let's say that I want to just compare against itself because my environment broke. All of a sudden, nothing is working. So let's compare. Actually, so we're going to compare those two. So what does that look like? Hit compare. And you can see again the changes between the two. So these values exist in both, but this is what it looked like in between the two. So this changed. Let me run it the other way. So 23, do 22, and let's do 23, and then hit compare again. There you go. And then it shows you if anything changed. This stayed the same. This changed because we've been obviously messing with it. If I select the label, then I can see any other values that might have changed in between the two. And that's another way to compare the values. Apart from if you're doing this troubleshooting or if you're doing this kind of work, you can, apart from looking at maybe your commits and the repos and who changed what, you can just come straight here very quickly and figure out what is it that changed. You won't know who changed it if that's something you're trying to find, but you'll know what changed. Jeff, a store is just another way for it to call an Azure App Configuration instance, basically, pretty much. Now, if I come back over here, actually, let me look at so that release completed. Again, I refresh my application without having to rebuild the application, without having to deploy or do a release for the application code itself. I can see the changes in my application without really any problem at all. So again, one of the feature that I promote the most about this is because it saves you a lot of time if you ever run into that situation. You also have the option to restore from the portal. So if I select the date, so let's say yesterday, what did it look like yesterday, let's say? Because my environment was working yesterday, so I want to just go back to whatever it is that I was looking at yesterday. Let's scroll over. So over here it shows you the changes that have happened in there. So it shows you what the previous value was. Right now it's black. Previously it was red, or at this point in time it was red. And then if I wanted to move over, so if I select that and I click restore, that value would change there. So I clicked on restore. If I go back over here and I look at that, if I edit, and then it went back to red because we made that change. So again, if you're trying to recover from some sort of failure, if you're trying to recover from an unintended change, that's another thing that you can do very quickly, and you can have that reflected in your application, provided that you updated your Sentinel key as well. So before we move to feature management, any questions about anything, any of the other features that we've looked at so far? Okay. So I have two different features here. Again, I have them separated by an environment label. So I have a development feature that is not enabled and it doesn't have any sort of filter. So what I'm going to do, and over here I still have my local, and I have my I have this one running as well. So what I'm going to do is I am going to enable it. And I'm going to update my Sentinel key real quick too. I believe this is pointing, yeah, this should be pointing to development. So I'm going to give it a little bit, and that should update in a minute. In the meantime, I'm actually going to stop this, and I am going to make a change so that we can use the feature filters. So I'm going to enable feature flags. And then over here, if you're going to use a filter, so as I said, for enabling a time window filter, really only one line of code that you need to add here, saying that you want to use a time window filter. Then I'm going to start this over. I'm going to come back over here. And for the development, and I didn't change the environment on the local, so I'm going to have to go back to that. But as you can see here, your feature is enabled automatically, again, without a rebuild, without a redeploy. If you find out that the feature that was supposed to be enabled today is not there, you don't have to wait to do that. You can just go to your configuration, make those changes, and automatically it's going to be available for your customers if that's something that you want. Now, like I said, let me redo this because I didn't change the environment. So if I come over here, I'm going to switch this to production. This as well. And I'm going to restart. Now I'm going to come back. So now, because I changed the environment and that one is not enabled, you're not seeing here again. So we are going to come over here to the feature manager. And as you can see, there's a warning to this because the expiration of that is in the past. So we're going to have to change that in a minute. So I'm going to hit edit. And I'm using a custom time filter. So as you can see here, this is where you can choose in between the different filters that you want to use for your features. So targeting, time window, or custom. I'm going to switch this to today, which is the February 23rd. And then I'm going to switch this to 16. Excuse me. And I'm going to switch this to expire 6:59, 7:25 p.m. And apply. So now you come over here. I update my Sentinel key, which again, this you would, in your actual environments, you would probably do this on either an Azure DevOps, or if you're using something like GitHub Actions or something like that, that's the way that you would probably want to do that. And it'll give it a minute, and there it is. So since the time window or the start of the time window is already there, it's going to turn it off. I set it up for a long expiration, but if I set it up for only 2 or 3 minutes, you would see that if we refresh the application during that time, this would automatically, or this would disappear whenever that expiration or that window was gone. I think the last feature that I want to go real quick is the import export. So if you were using a JSON file, for example, for your configuration, you have the ability to import that in here. So you can choose to import from another app configuration. You can choose to import from an app service or a configuration file if you just want to use whatever you have locally and you want to get started with it. So you want to do .NET, for example. You want to do JSON. So let's look at a file. Let's see. Where is my repos? Let's do this one. Then some of this one. Just so it does the import of whatever configuration values you have in there. So go back to that. Import configuration file .NET. Oh, there we go. Missed this part. To label, I'm not going to specify anything, separator, prefix, and then apply. So now it automatically imported any configurations that I might have on that file. So this allowed host wasn't there before. I have this connection string on that file, and then I have these other configurations that were imported automatically. So again, if you're doing that migration and you don't want to start from scratch, you don't want to configure it by hand, you can just get started with this import and get all your values moved over here while you're doing your testing or while you're trying to figure out if app configuration is going to be the right choice for you. I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover as far as the demo goes for this. I do want to put on the screen. So I have on the left the QR code is the Azure App Configuration documentation from the Microsoft side that you can go and access a lot of the code and a lot of things that I showed. You can find them in that configuration or in that documentation. And then the one on the right is a link to the slides in case you want to check them out later, or in case you want to pull the prayer for your demos in case you want to use that at work. Feel free to do so as well. And I think that is it for me. Any questions? All right. Thank you, Sam.
Excellent. Thank you, Sam. Highly appreciate it. And I really like that little demo prayer. That's going to come in very handy and very creative too.
I wish I could claim credit for it, but I actually found it online. So
it happens. So before we have the concluding slides, I just wanted to ask one more time. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Sam Gomez? And if not, then let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, so I just have a couple of wrap-up announcements. As far as resources, I pasted several links in the chat window pertaining to, first, the YouTube link. So the presentation is being recorded, and it will be uploaded to YouTube in just a few short days after it's being edited. Kindly ask you to subscribe to the channel to get the upload notifications. In addition, tech events are also posted on my blog, and the link for that is also posted in chat. And again, if you subscribe to that, you can get the updates as they're posted. And last but certainly not least, the feedback eval. If you would please take a minute to fill that out at the link posted in chat. This way we can give Sam some creative or constructive criticism. For those that joined us after the start of the meeting, an offer from Manning.com with 35% off, with a discount code in the link also posted in chat. One of the things that we always like to do is to cover upcoming events. And so for user groups and conferences, starting in March, every first Tuesday is the Ohio North Database Training User Group. They're basically hybrid. They meet online as well as in person. And you can find the meeting information posted on meetup.com. The links for these URLs are posted over on my blog, and the link for my blog, as you might have guessed, is also in chat. On March 8th is the Azure Cleveland User Group. That also meets online. We don't have a speaker lined up yet, but we certainly will by that time. So check out the website. On March 16th, there are two groups that are happening, one in the Great Lakes region, or Okemos, Michigan, and another one in Chicago. I will be speaking at the Chicago.NET User Group, talking about adding machine learning to .NET applications. So if you're interested, you can sign up for that. And then on March 23rd, which is going to be the fourth Thursday of March, we're going to have the March meeting of this group, the Cleveland C# User Group. And we're going to have a special guest, Scott Hanselman, and he'll be joining us and presenting then. As for conferences, on March 10th is the Global AI Bootcamp being held in New York City. And this is also a hybrid conference, both online as well as in person. So feel free to check them out. And then May 11th through the 13th is the Global Azure 2023. That is basically a 4-day conference. Did my math wrong? No, 3. Okay, an edit point here. So it's a 3-day conference, May 11th through the 13th, and it is held online. Lots of great speakers, just about round-the-clock type presentations, because it's bringing in speakers from all over the world. Free of charge, a lot of great content. One of the things that we also like to cover are job openings. If you check out TechSystems at techsystems.com/IT-jobs, there's always jobs that are posted there for all sorts of expertise levels, both beginner as well as more senior level. And always like to ask, who's hiring and who's looking? If you would please make yourself known, either in person or in chat. And if you're too shy to do so, or you don't have anything currently available, you can certainly reach out to me afterwards. My contact information, snasser@nistechnologies.com. You can also find me on Twitter at samnasser. And my blog, as I mentioned before, samnasser.blogspot.com. And lastly, if we're not connected on LinkedIn, I invite you to do so. And so with that, thanks again to Sam Gomez for presenting and for everyone for attending, and look forward to seeing you all next month. Good night, everyone.